Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the course of world history. I am, of course, Mr. Samuelson, and today we are talking about Safavid culture. This is the Persian culture during the Safavid dynasty. So, our essential question here is what factors shaped the culture of the Safavid Empire? Well, first, we need to get a sense of this empire geographically. Now, this empire lasts for just over 200 years and is in southern Southwest Asia. Now, during much of its existence, they fight wars, long series of wars against the Ottoman Empire. And conflict between these two empires over this territory in here really does define a lot of what the Safavid Empire is up to. Now, this consistent warfare does limit the achievements of the Safavid Empire, and it makes them kind of the less well known of these three gunpowder empires. So let's get into them. The head of the Safavid government was called the Shah. That is the leading title. And the Shah of this empire could always trace their bloodline back to the Prophet Muhammad. This ties into religious beliefs of the Shia Islam. Now, the Shah shares power with a Grand Vizier or a Prime Minister. This is somebody who really handles the legislative side of their government. But the Grand Vizier did have to agree to the decisions of the Shah. Now, powerful Shahs were able to completely control their Grand Viziers. A powerful Shah really did dominate this government, relegating the Grand Vizier to a much lesser role. And these powerful Shahs would have absolute power. But weak Shahs would step back from government. They would just enjoy the pleasures of being the wealthy ruler of their empire and leave much of the governing to their Grand Viziers, sometimes making that Grand Vizier, in fact, a more powerful, more important role than being the Shah itself. Many of them did, however, work very well in partnership with each other, and those would be the most successful periods of the Safavid dynasty. So, art and architecture. Safavid art does tend to focus on utilitarian purposes. What they are best known for are the art that could be used, had a practical purpose. And they're best known for this intricate glass, metal, and ceramic works. Here's an example of ceramics that was created within the Safavid Empire, very beautiful, but also designed to be used. Here we have a copper pitcher. Again, very well done, great craftsmanship, but again, something that was intended to be used. Here's Safavid carpeting, Persian rugs, also something that they were very well known for. Some would argue that they made some of the best rugs in the world at that time, and it was something that was sought from their empire. Now, religion was a very important part of the culture of the Safavid dynasty. The Safavids were Shia Muslims, and much more so than the Ottomans or the Mughals, they were militantly Shia, right? Shiism was the official state religion, and this Shia leadership really do suppress other forms of religion. Sunni Muslims had been tolerated under Mongol rule. Sunni Muslims had moved into that area because the Mongols promoted this sort of toleration, but it was not the Shia belief. And the Safavids, once they come back into power in that region and the Mongols are forced out, do come down hard on Sunni faith. And Sunni leaders are forced to either convert to Shiism or they are executed. There is no tolerance of other religions within the Safavid dynasty. This religious intolerance, however, creates problems. The Shia religious leaders rise up, right? And the religion itself becomes very powerful, very influential within Safavid society. But the inflexibility leads to conflict, both internally at first, and then later it's the external conflicts that really dominate Safavid history. The best known of these were the wars between the Shia Safavid dynasty and the Sunni but tolerant Sunni um, Ottoman Empire over control over areas. And some of this was dominated by religious conflict. The Shia Safavids coming down hard on Sunni populations, and the Ottoman Empire coming in trying to protect those who lived in that area. These were the source of many of the conflicts between the Ottomans and the Safavid dynasty. Now, within Safavid society, Safavid women lived in a very traditional, very Islamic household. None of what we saw in the Ottoman Empire with women, sometimes, particularly in lower class Ottoman societies, having a public role, not so much in Safavid society. Most Safavid women had little to no public life and spent their days tending to the households of their husbands or their fathers. Very conservative, very kind of kept out of sight, out of mind. Public life in Safavid society was extremely male dominated. Now, an exception was occasionally made for pious and celibate sisters and daughters of the most powerful of the Safavid leaders. On some occasion, you might see a noble woman who was unmarried and very religious, having some minor public roles, sometimes being seen at court, but still a very limited role in comparison to other societies of the time. Safavid economy. The Safavids relied heavily on Silk Road trade. If we remember that Silk Road coming out of the east and spreading out as it goes west, we look here at our Safavid dynasty, sitting right at the middle of this Silk Road and controlling a lot of those Silk Road trade routes, passing from the east to the Ottoman Empire and then on to Europe. Now, the trade passed from the Mughal Empire over here into the Ottomans, had to go through Safavid hands, which gave them a lot of power and a lot of leverage in trade between those two other gunpowder empires. Now, initially, the Safavids were content with this role. They did not want to engage in direct trade with Europeans at the far end of the Silk Road. They just wanted to operate as middlemen. But increasingly, as the Portuguese start to control the Indian Ocean trade and set up trade ports near Safavid-controlled territory, the Safavids evolve their trading policies to get more involved, more interaction with European traders. And this is especially true once the sea-based trade through the Indian Ocean starts to supplant most of the Silk Road trade, and trade along the land routes decreases as it becomes cheaper and safer to trade with ocean-going voyages. All right, that's all we've got for today on Safavid culture and Safavid society. I hope that you learned something, and I'll see you next time. Farewell.